All right. So what we're going to talk about is how to graph inequalities. And so here's a little bit of information that's good for you to know. This is based on assuming that you have experience with inequalities. And so whenever you graph a linear inequality, you need to remember that everything is just like graphing a line, except for you don't always draw a solid line. Whenever you're connecting your points, it may be a dotted line or a dashed line or a solid line. How do you tell the difference? Well, if it don't have the equal to, it's dotted. If it has the equal to symbols at the bottom here, it's a solid line. And so you don't always automatically draw a solid line. You have to check that out first. Now this part right here is really important. This part here is really important because it tells you basically the idea of what's going on. And you have to shade. You don't just draw a line, you got to shade on top of it, or below it, or to the left, or to the right of it, however you want to look at it. If your problem that you're shading says y is less than, then you're going to shade down. If it's y is greater than, once you solve for y, and it's y is greater than, you shade up. If it's x is less than, once you solve your equation for x, and it's x is less than, you shade to the left. And if it's x is greater than, you shade to the right. Each one of these are going to be things that you need to pay attention to as you work these problems. Is what symbol does it use? And which direction do you shade? Alright, that's very important. Now, we don't worry about this yet because this part is for systems. So we're not concerning ourselves with that part yet. However, this part down here is very important. Meaning, don't forget that whenever you're solving for y or x, getting your equation in the proper form to graph, that if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you flip the direction of the inequality sign. So this sign then flips to this sign, or this sign then flips to that sign, if you multiply or divide by a negative number. And that's only if you multiply or divide by a negative number. Let's get into what we're talking about and see how we work this. Right here, notice that each one of these have equal signs to them. And so I'm just asking you to graph these lines here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and plot my y-intercept, which is -5. So I'll put that here. What am I doing? I'm graphing this line right here. My slope is 2 over 1. So from this point, let's make that a little bit bigger. So from this point, I count up 1, 2, and to the right 1. Now you say, where'd that 1 come from? Because it's a whole number. You put a 1 underneath. Now I have, excuse me, my two lines, and therefore I can go get my line and draw my line through that point. And I can make it longer. Alright, so that's that line right there. It's just drawing the line. Since it has equations, I just draw the line straight up, no shading or anything. Look at B. B asked us to graph 3x minus 5y equals 15. And so in order to do that, what I need to do is do a little bit of work first. So I'm going to put this in the proper form so that I can graph. What's the proper form? Slope-intercept. That's correct. I heard you. You said it with your mind. And so you get y equals 3/5 x minus 3. Because you're dividing by -5, negative to negative make a positive, and that becomes, and so this is what I'm actually going to graph, that equation there. So I go look for -3, which is that point there, and up 3, 1, 2, 3 over 5, boom, and then I draw my line here, and that is that equation right there. Now I could work that one, but just for time's sake, you get the idea. This is just practicing graphing a line. Now let's actually graph inequalities. And before we can graph these, we need to put these in the proper form. All right, so what's the proper form? It still is y equals mx plus b. So what I'm going to do is put these in the proper form. So again, in order for me to do that, I got to go back to my paper and put them in the proper form. So what's the proper form? I got to subtract x from both sides. Negative y is less than negative x plus 4. Now notice that my y is negative, so I have to divide by negative 1. Remember what I said you do if you have to divide or multiply by negative 1? This changes direction. X minus 4. Everything else stays the same, but you have to remember that whenever you divide or multiply by a negative number, that you change the direction of your inequality. This didn't stay less than, it flipped. That's very important to remember, and that's only if you divide or multiply by a negative. Notice that I subtracted here and I didn't change it, because it's not if you have a subtraction, it's if you divide or multiply by a negative number. And so here we go again with negative 2x from both sides. And I have negative y is greater than or equal to negative 2x minus 3. But again, I can't leave it like that. I have to divide, I guess you could multiply as well, by negative 1. And you're going to get y is less than or equal to. See, that has an equal to. I can't forget that. But this is the only thing that changes. If you flip the equal to, it's just going to be equal still, so you don't flip that. And so these are the two equations that I'm going to graph. These two right here. And so this also changed as well. And so now I'm going to graph both of those. Now notice this don't have the equal to. So as I graph this equation, let's stick with the green. I'm going to go with negative 4 here, and my slope is 1. So I count up 1 and over 1, and that's my second point. Now, I do not pick a solid line. Why? Because my problem here doesn't have an equal to up here. I use a dotted line, and what you could do on your paper is just kind of pick your pencil up and put it down, dotted line here, there, or whatever. Now, if we go back, this equation here is y is greater than. I'm graphing y is greater than. And so the idea is, how do I show y is greater than over here? How do I show, y is greater than? Well, you have to take your pencil and you lightly shade greater than for the y is all this area on top. So I'm going to shade everything on top. And I kind of got wild with my shading. But everything on top here. So you would lightly shade with your pencil on top of the line, everything. But lightly shade. And so I need to kind of fix some of my over shading. I guess it don't want me to. Anyway, that shouldn't be down there. Alright, so the next one is this equation right here. Y is less than or equal to 2x plus 3. So let me go back here, and I'm going to use a different color. And plus 3 is right here. And my slope is 2, so that's up 2, 1, 2, and to the right 1. And so I put my point there. And again, since this is equal to, what kind of line do I use? A solid or a dotted line? And if you remember, equal to, gets a, let's go back here. Excuse those dots. That's a little bit too weird for me. But it's digital. It's showing you where I've had my mouse. Alright. So now I have my solid line because it's equal to. But remember, we have to shade. This is less than. So I am going to shade less than. Now, less than is everything below this line. So I'm going to do that. Everything below the line. Alright, so normally we'll put 1 on each graph. We wouldn't put 2 on a graph, but we will later. But this is how you shade the first one, and this is how you would shade and draw the second one. Now, let's try one more. Hopefully this one will make a little bit more sense to you if that one didn't. I need to graph these two right here. Alright, in order to graph these, notice what type of lines they are. They're X only and Y only. So these are special types of lines. These lines are, this one is a horizontal line. So what I do is I go to -4 here, and I get my line tool out, and it's going to be a dotted line. Why is it dotted? Because there is no equal to, and it's just going to go straight across. And excuse me, since it's greater than, I'm going to shade above. So all this up here, I shade on top of this line because Y is greater than. It's talking about Y is the solution area. It's greater than that line is what it's saying. And so I shade on top. Got it? Okay. Now, let's try this one here. X is less than 5. Well, how do you graph that? Well, that is a vertical line. And it also will be a dotted line. Now, how do I know it's going to be a dotted line? Well, because it doesn't have an equal to. So I'll do my dotted line. And so the question is, which way on the x-axis is less than? Now, if you forget, what I'm doing is I'm referring back to this part here. X is less than, you shade to the left. X is greater than, you shade to the right. So which one do we have? We have X is less than. So I shade to the left, you know, because all your boxes and everything that you own is in a box to the left. Well, it was funny for a second. Anyway, everything to the left of this line, I should get up to the line, but I'm doing this with a mouse, and so I'm not as accurate as you video game. Ah, so you look at that. Anyway, that's how you graph and shade inequalities. If you have any questions, ask your mama.